love in my life. I love that. I don't know if you resonate with that, but it takes all the other words away, and you just say, by the power vested in me, I declare, I choose, I accept. So thank you for that. That was a really nice thing for 2 weeks to be mulling over, and I get to share that with you. And I'm still waiting for the ring, because it felt like that. Okay, now, back to my shyness. So there's a book, so you don't see it. There's a book that I love called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. I don't know if any of you read it. And it's really uncovering early childhood learning that enters into our subconscious, that controls us through most of our lives and limits our success. And it's a great book at looking at the very subtle ways that we grow up in our families with our moms and dads and brothers and sisters, and how cues in our whole experience, sometimes passive cues and sometimes very out loud cues, they shape us into setting limits. He calls it a thermostat, setting limits to how far we will go in our lives before we start to sabotage ourselves and pull back. So we may be in the best relationship we ever thought we could have. We never thought we could experience so much love and closeness. And then we'll start picking stupid arguments with our partner for no reason. We'll get agitated for no reason. And he suggests that it's because we're going back to an early limit that we set on ourselves according to how we experience relationships. And when they get really good, we get really uncomfortable. And I can see in my own life, when things get really good, I can feel really shy or really kind of disconnected. And I've worked my whole life probably to move through any sense of shyness or fear so that I could be present in my experience. And I just wanted to read you real quickly, before I do something really fantastic for you, some barriers that Gay Hendricks talks about. And these are false beliefs, and I thought I would just mention them, and only because I'm working on them through this experience, through my path here, and looking at how I definitely don't want to sabotage my success with the love and the openness that's in my experience today. And my shyness can do that, so I'm using that as my condition. So he suggests first that the first barrier is a false belief that we are fundamentally flawed. And I know that a lot of people feel that way in the world, that we get born into a life and something's wrong with us. And we hear that when we're little kids, and there's challenges to us being fully and richly loved, even by our parents. That's not as passive as it used to be. In other words, today I think more parents are embracing the true nature of their children and demonstrating pure and true love and giving them the opportunity to grow and be the best people that they can be. And I brought an example of a perfect person, Zora, who's going to help me out in a minute. So one of my friends from Idlewild came down, and so sometimes the little kids are born into families where they don't think that they're perfect, and we grow up with that. I want everybody to release any of that if you carry that around with you at all. It's just not the truth of you, and there's nothing flawed about anybody here in this room. There's nothing flawed in your family. There's nothing flawed in your enemies. There's nothing flawed in the people that you love. It's just not true. It just may have been an awkward, subtle, mistaken message that people picked up when they were young. The second one is that there's a false belief that by succeeding, we're being disloyal to people in our past. And you see this, I see this in movies a lot. I watched a movie where a young guy, maybe a potential football player, was living up to his father's expectations and didn't want to do that. I saw the movie last night. And so his whole life was about sabotaging himself so that his father wouldn't be disappointed in him. The third barrier is the false belief that we are a burden in the world. I don't think anybody here feels that we're a burden at all. Actually, we all know that we're here to express life in its fullest in the world. That's our mission. But some people have the false belief that they're a burden in the world. And the fourth, which is the most interesting to me, is the false belief that we have to dim our light, our brilliance, so that we won't outshine anyone else. And that's absolutely not true. Our light, our brilliance we're not competing to show our brilliance or our light. So, in thinking through and contemplating where my stuff comes from, where the messages that I received as a young child, where they've taken me to today, I can see little spots where I've tended to possibly sabotage my greatness or my success. And then in the contemplation, I started to come to a realization, and I started seeing particularly in young people in our teaching and young friends, that it's the baggage that I've laid on and carried around over the years that's diminished my light. And I want to return back to my youth. I always say this, I want to return back to my youth when I fully express life without any limitation. And I started looking around at young people and seeing how, especially around me, I must be attracting beautifully vibrant young people in life, how beautifully they express who they are without any sense of limitation or fear. And I want to be more like that. So if you notice, the title of my talk is Nourish Your Youthful Nature. Nourish Your Youthful Nature. And that's what I have actually been working on in this experience, getting to ministry, finding that sense of perfection and wholeness and nourishing that. Now I have a friend, Zora, and she's going to come up in a minute. And I want to tell you a little bit about why I've invited her today. It's always good to have young people come up. And Zora, about the same time that Dr. Michael went to Washington, D.C., October, to participate in the Occupy experience in your way, to bring light to the experience, my friend Zora from Idlewild went that way too. And she took a train trip with her dad, Mark, through Chicago to New York and to Washington, D.C. about the same time. So we had a lot of light and a lot of energy, positive energy, moving from Southern California. And Zora's experience is really, it brings warmth to my heart that a young person moved forward, took a step forward to experience life in a way that most of us maybe wouldn't do today. And I'd like you to hear her story. She's going to come up and tell her story about this trip. And maybe some of that youthful vibrancy and experience will come through, and you'll be captured by it today. And my hope is that whatever that is, you'll take that into your day, and you'll be youthful. So Zora, come on up.
Hi everybody, so I'm Zora. And I'm also Doug's guardian princess, or princess warrior. That's what it was. And so recently, or about 4 or 5 months ago, my dad told me that he had heard about Occupy Washington, and so he wanted us to go there, the two of us. And so a little ways after that, so we were already planning on going, and then Occupy Wall Street started up, and so we figured that we'd go to that as well. And so I was a little nervous about it because I'd heard all about the like policemen pepper spraying everyone, but I sort of felt like, well, I get to miss 2 weeks of school, and I get to go to New York, which I've never been to, and so I was really excited. But even when I arrived in Zuccotti Park at Occupy Wall Street, I was still a little bit nervous about like getting pepper sprayed until we interviewed this Tea Partier and a libertarian and a progressive, and they were arm in arm, and one of them had been arrested on the Brooklyn Bridge, and he told me that the first person who got arrested was a 13-year-old girl, and she hadn't been separated by her parents or anything, and that's really what I had been nervous about. And so then I started thinking, oh, okay, well, this isn't the worst thing. And so I started handing out, I started doing sort of work for like the movement, and I started passing out the Occupied Wall Street Journal, and so because I just figured that I'd help out, and so that was really awesome. And so at one point I realized that I really wasn't nervous. I stopped myself because my dad and I were going around and interviewing different people throughout the park and the movement, And at one point I couldn't find my dad, and I wasn't really nervous because I was helping out at the food table and everything.